The solutions are now widely available.
AW Learn features best-in-class thought leadership, the latest industry trends, and indispensable knowledge that will supercharge your professional development.
Please note that this session will include a Q&A powered by Slido. To ask a question at any point during the presentation, log on to your Advertising Week app and select Microsoft Stage. Thank you, and please welcome in Show Me the Money, proving ROI has never been easier.
All right, great, welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We thought we would ease in the morning of the last day of Advertising Week with a light chat about ROI and attribution. So I'm Hillary Milanese. I am the retail editor at Digiday. My title on the slide's a little bit outdated, but I will let our panelists introduce themselves. If John, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I'm John Povey. I run marketing and analytics for A4 Media.
Hi, I'm Mike Romoff. At LinkedIn, I run our ad agency and channel sales team, working across a number of our ecosystem partners.
And I'm Karima Azmerli. I run data sciences for Wavemaker Global.
Hi, I'm Antonio Tomarchio, CEO. I am founder of Cubic, a cross-channel attribution company focused on the offline world.
Great. So let's set the mood. I want everyone to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you right now with the state of media measurement? 1 being the worst, 10 being the dream scenario.
Can I go first?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I would say it's like 6.357.
Okay, exact. I like it.
Because we're so precise in how we measure that's my answer.
Okay, not bad, not bad.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. We're probably in the 6 to 7 range. I mean, when you look back at where we were a year ago, 2 years ago, it's hard to say that we haven't progressed so much, but there's, being so close to the data, that there's so much further we can go. And when we start breaking down kind of the barriers between data silos and platforms, we'll really lift those numbers to 6.375.
So I would say, yes, it's definitely between the 6 and 7, but it varies by industry. Some industries are way better equipped to be closer to the 7, and others are having a lot of challenges that are still in the 6.00.
Yeah, I would agree with this assessment. It really depends on the industry. I would say industry where, there is a mostly distribution online, and they can be around 7, if not higher. But for companies with a brick and mortar distribution, I would say would be even lower than 6 at the moment, because there are many challenges to be solved yet.
Right. Yeah. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the industries that you think are well positioned? Obviously, we're supposed to be talking about how ROI has never been easier, but I don't think it's that simple. But what right now are you seeing in terms of the industries that are actually starting to figure this out?
Well, definitely there is improvement, constant improvement, a lot of new data that can help the measurement attribution challenge. In particular, there are progress on the identity resolution. That is really key, of course. We're seeing progress on offline data. So, not only sales, but also the combination of sales and geolocation data. They can help assessing ROI in the physical world. So definitely there is progress, but also many challenges, I would say, especially for CPG brands. It's really tough to get down to the SKU level transaction, as they don't have first-party data, and there's no great sharing with the retailers. The identity resolution needs still to have some progress. And finally, of course, the large dominance of walled gardens is another challenge to have a true holistic cross-channel attribution platform, because it's really not possible to combine neither the data nor the methodologies across walled gardens and non-walled gardens. So I would say that there's still a lot of work to be done in order to be able to have the dream situation where a brand could be able to assess and the ROI per channel, and even have even develop a marketing mix media modeling that will be really data driven and optimized in real time with results of the marketing campaigns. This is the dream scenario, and still a lot to do.
I would say that industry that really got better measurement and better attribution and ROI are usually those who built really solid infrastructure early on in the 70s and 80s. And those usually are, financial services, retail, and telecom. And that was built, mostly because of their direct mail programs that actually enable them to know more about their customers and their prospects. And by the overlaying digital, it's easier for them to actually have control and have better measurement when offline conversion happened driven by an online exposure.
I think we're talking a lot about transactional businesses, right? Where there's something that's a very tangible, measurable event. And we're talking about proving ROI. I think it's never been easier to measure something that we call ROI. But I think we often confuse what we can measure and optimize to for some actual underlying value. And what at LinkedIn and what I've seen in the industry, especially on the B2B side, we look at what are the strategies that businesses are trying to accomplish? What in real world are you trying to get the teams of people who actually make purchase decisions or business decisions to think about what your offering is, your brand, and the things that we measure in media don't often line up with what those real life outcomes are. And so if there's a metric, and you guys probably know this too, if there's a metric, our compulsion is to put it in a spreadsheet, stack rank it, and cut off the bottom third and say that we're optimizing. And I think if we're calling that ROI, we're missing a pretty rich area for understanding how people actually perform in the real world, what we're trying to do as businesses. And I think from that standpoint, we actually have a long way to go to really be able to measure to that level of depth.
Yeah, I think that, as you're setting those business strategies and trying to determine what are you getting return on, and coming out of the traditional direct marketing type of targeting where it's very clean, very measurable, and that is expanding. That is expanding into retail, that is expanding with new data on board. There's also, kind of this lift in measurement that I think we'll begin to see get more tied into the brand marketing and what the long-term impact of that brand marketing is, because it may not be as easily optimized and cut as we can with the direct marketing. And that is something that you want to make sure that we do set up a process to not overcorrect and put too much of our focus on direct marketing if we're trying to build out a long-term vision for a brand and a longer-term business strategy.
Well, that's always the trap of thinking about funnels and full funnels and top of funnel, bottom funnel. The stuff that gets closer and closer to the transaction is that much easier to measure. And so I see my head of marketing sitting in the audience. And so when we go and try to ask for more budget, our nice finance partners ask us, well, what's the ROI? And it's much more straightforward to show ROI on lower funnel activity. We spent this money on ads and we got this many people to sign up and they spent this much. And so the funding goes into the places where we've got an easy story to tell. The reality is we know much more nuance than that. Right? There's a lot of thought leadership. There's a lot of things that we're doing to help people understand and have a better feeling about us as marketers, about our brand. And then that manifests in more productive media as you move people through the purchase decision. But it's not easy to really understand the impact at every stage, and especially how those things work together. And the trap is to fall in love with the things you can measure towards the bottom of the funnel and towards the transaction. And I think, again, we've got some work to do to help us understand how that all works together.
Yeah, would you say that the sheer definition of ROI is different, especially if you're coming from the advertising agency side versus the brand marketer side? And what do you think would be a better way to kind of frame that?
I think about it as marketing is an extension of a business's strategy. It's not the strategy in and of itself. And so as a business, you're trying to enter in a certain market, acquire some share in a certain area. You're trying to do something as a business, and one of the tools that you have is bringing your message out to the market. And so the higher you can get in terms of visibility into how a company is performing against their strategic objectives, you can put that marketing in context for how effective it's being. I think that you can take the extreme example. We work with a lot of agencies and the KPIs are very fixed, and a lot of times they're very quantitative and low level. optimizing against them, it's hard to understand how that's actually affecting things at a broader level. And I think where there's a partnership between strategy, between execution, between marketing, between media, and all of those things looked at holistically, you can really understand from a business standpoint what the return is versus just a media ROI.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
We were, talking previously about what are we asking marketing to do for us. And in many cases, when we get briefs on campaigns, we find there's 3-4 objectives in that brief. The campaign needs to lift awareness, consideration, but also drive sales, and all of these are measured. And to be frank, at the end, we measure, or we can measure few, but the strategy, if there is 3 KPIs that we are driving to, will not be consistent and will not make sense and will not drive, all of these 3 KPIs. The worst on top of that is when you hear that, or the industry talks about how everything can be measured today. We spoke earlier about the fact that, in analytics and in data, we know, and we have very, realistic sometimes expectation from the data that, it's not perfect, and it's not going to be perfect this year or next year, but we will make progress in learning more and being able to identify better the ROIs. The expectations are not necessarily, supporting us in managing the expectations of our advertisers or our partners, in that we need to agree on a KPI, but also we need to agree that certain things are not easy to measure and will not be measured. If we are looking at pushing a brand campaign and measuring it based on sales, you need a long window. Mm-hmm. You need, maybe a year to see the results on sales. And that's not necessarily something we all agree on or we all look at in the same way. So there's multiple challenges we face. ROI for DR is the easy one. And if there's behavioral metric on top of transactional, yes, that's great. We can measure and optimize. But if we are trying to link long window metric, going from awareness to sales in one campaign that only lasts a month, that's definitely not possible.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. Sometimes the attribution is very focused on short-term effect, while the challenge is really to assess what is happening long-term. And of course, the definition of ROI really depends on the vertical. Because if you think about restaurant chains, the capability to intercept a visit is probably as important almost as sales. So, because they don't have also a lot of first-party data, there are a lot of transactions still in cache. So, yes, sometimes it's challenging to really even identify the KPIs that make sense for the campaign. And it's even more challenging being able to measure on a 6 to 12 months time frame, which should be the time window if you're looking at transaction and sales lift.
I think some of it is about a real partnership between media owners, between agencies, between brands. Yeah. I don't know if this has happened to any of you guys, but a lot of times we'll get a campaign that's running and the purpose is brand. This is a brand campaign. And then they come back 6 weeks later and we got our budget cut. Well, what happened? Well, your click-through rate is too low on your brand campaign.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I thought this was about brand. Well, it is, but you're in the bottom performing, click rate. And, you totally get it, right? There's someone who is, gold on certain KPIs, even though we're saying it's about brand.
Yeah.
To your point, we ask everything of these media campaigns, and it becomes hard to do anything besides really look at short-term metrics.
Yeah. You can't just look at, and we get it all the time, the standard metrics of placing media, right? Am I getting impressions? Am I getting click-through, video completion rate? All of these items.
Short-term.
It's only short-term. And when you miss the overall strategy of that campaign or the build of that campaign as part of 6 or 7 and what it's meant to do, I think that's a challenge that we're facing on a day-to-day basis. I was
just going to say, we had this conversation, I think, when we first met each other around creativity. Right. So in the conversation around ROI, how do you think about actual creative, ad creative, being creative in marketing? Where does that show up in the numbers? And in this field, in this industry, the creative is the core of what we actually do. But if we get so focused on measurement down to, feeling like it's scientific, when in reality we know there's as much art, maybe more than science. Where does that play a role in what we actually do? And I think you see a lot of creative or ad creative move towards the lowest common denominator because you're trying to drive or juice certain metrics, and it sort of misses the core aspects of authenticity, of voice, of the things that brands really value the most. But when it comes to execution, you fall into this trap of what's going to get me the most likes and shares. Same thing for people. I've seen that happen.
The future of attribution, in my perspective, is really the capability to assess long-term effect in terms of market share and sales. That's where probably we're below 5 yet, definitely.
Right.
So there is focus still on short term. But
Yeah,
that's
that would
the real
require
value that you have to measure, and you have to be able to understand by channel also this impact if possible. So that's the challenge I think we have as vendors and marketers have as well.
And that would require the clients changing the way that they look at all of these campaigns as they're trying to do everything at once. So you see this clash forming. What are the risks that brands then run when they say, okay, we're going to take this all in-house? It's a trendy thing to do right now. You hear the word control thrown out a lot, but it sounds like brands sometimes aren't even really grasping the nature. They're trying to do too much, and having that outside agency partner to kind of take that outside exterior viewpoint and give them a word of reason would be a benefit. But we see more and more brands wanting to take full control over their first party data. What are the risks that they run?
So, two things, I'm very supportive of the ambition of owning data that our client have, and we always hear the statement of we want to own our data, and that's fair, or we want to own our customers. And something to be aware of: no one owns the customer. We own aspects and dimensions of the customers. No one, none the publisher, no Google, no Facebook, no single advertiser really own a 360-degree view of the customer. All of us have pieces of information that, when brought together, are way more meaningful than when siloed. So my perspective and what I've seen done is, yes, definitely our advertisers and our clients are getting way better, and that helps us. When they give us the right data to action on, it's day and night. We are smarter. We do provide better results when we have this true view and more data points on who the customer is that we need to go after, or what other audience we need to bring to complement that pool of customers. But I think the challenge is in this ambition of owning, we isolate one view, and we don't look at the 360, and we don't look holistically on who is the customer, and we miss the opportunity of attracting the right customer.
Yeah, I mean, from a theoretical point of view, I think the idea that a brand owns the data is absolutely the right direction for them. I mean, and as Karima said, we are starting to work with brands, combining the data we can provide with first-party data, and it's literally the night with TrueSet. We can normalize better, project visits better, so that's the direction. But of course, it's complex. It requires also the right tools, the right platforms, the right API integration. So I think very few brands, to be honest, are fully equipped at the moment to go in that direction. And I think it's important that they have awareness, of what they can really do and what they're equipped for, because otherwise they risk really to focus on a limited picture of the consumer.
I think there are some aspects that necessarily need to move inside of a company, and it's harder to do that as a third-party relationship. As communication with customers, with prospects, with the outside world is less episodic. Like, we're not saying we're going to run this for 2 months and then we're going to stop. The communication that we have with our current customers, with people who we want to bring on, is just a continuous part of our business operation. It's not a separate function. Right? To your point, it plugs into what we know about them interacting on our website, with our product, with our people, with customer service. all of that information goes towards improving the way that we communicate. That's a core strategic process that companies really do need to have close control over, and a third party, it's hard to do that. Similarly, in a lot of social media situations where you're speaking with your brand's voice, it's hard to outsource your brand's voice. And increasingly the expectation being a real-time, snarky, interesting way of reacting to events, it's hard to have someone else do that for you. But where I think the risk comes is in things like creativity and things like understanding other aspects of the market that you aren't privy to, where a partnership with an agency, third party, can actually bring a lot to the table, both in terms of execution and in ideas. So you're not stuck in your own echo chamber. You actually have some.
I will add one thing. We speak about ROI. The more we push the envelope in terms of data and technology, the costs becomes really high. And we are all experiencing those. And thinking about what is the ROI of the data has never been more relevant than now. So we think about the ROI of media, but no one measured what is that ROI that the data generates. And that's another question.
It's interesting because I think the biggest risk bringing it in-house is not knowing what you don't know, right? And being in that echo chamber, I completely agree on the points of being closest to your brand and being agile and nimble. It's been done with agencies. It just, the speed at which things are happening today in the digital ecosystem, you can't pivot fast enough. And it's finding what that new partnership needs to be on. And it depends on the maturity level of the organization. Maybe you need more help in the infrastructure or the science behind it or in the operations of execution.
I have a good example here, to reiterate that, many brands we work with, they're very protective of their first-party data, and that makes sense. So they say, okay, we'd like to import your offline data into our system and then combine that. But the problem is that this data is extremely complex. I mean, we have an entire team of data scientists working on challenges like normalization per store, being sure that it's representative. So if we provide the data directly to them, it's very tough for them to really be able to handle this data. So
if they can ingest it.
If they can inject, So we risk that, they're convinced that they're using the data, but as a matter in a proper way, but that's not a reality. So this is a big challenge I see, so that the brands can start having even misleading data interpretations because they're not the expert of a third-party data set. So that's a challenge that we're facing, and I think it's a risk.
So there is a distinction to be made about, getting smarter through owning the insights versus owning the raw data.
Exactly.
The raw data costs a lot to maintain, and the skill set is not easy to find. Believe me, we have position open for 6 and 9 months on this area, particularly before we find the right candidates. But still, infrastructure from a technology standpoint, softwares like storage softwares, and then what type of modelers you need and to do what of it. All of that needs to be figured out to measure the ROI of why you need to build your data warehouses and your data capability.
It's not the sexy stuff, but it's the foundational items that you need to be able to make sure the systems and data can be mined fast enough to be able to react and optimize how media dollars are being spent.
And that's not even bringing in the competing agendas of Facebook, Google, Amazon.
Wow.
So when you are dealing, like you were talking about silos, and how do you sort of help these clients and look at it in a way where you can piece it all together whenever these platforms aren't very generous with the data that they do share?
Well, I think the walled gardens like Facebook, Amazon, they have to take this wall down, and open at least to API integration with media agnostic measurement players. This is really much needed. Otherwise, it's going to be siloed with their own metrics, their own methodology, which is often not transparent. So it's really impossible to create an overall picture. We're seeing progress. I mean, both large giants are starting to introduce, for instance, API for sending offline conversions. But in that case, then they will combine then the offline conversions with the impressions, then generate the lift analysis themselves still. But that's at least a progress. The capability at least to send data in. They don't allow data out, but at least they're opening to inject data. I think this is really. Nothing against, of course, these companies. They're doing an amazing job, but their customers are spending, up to 60% of the media budget, the digital budget, at least in this platform. It is imperative that there is an opening to third-party players for measurement. I think it's in their best interest because they can, foster the ecosystem, and clients should ask for that.
So I'm definitely against sending clients' data in. I feel we are, this is, again, you are giving your assets to your main competitors. And the publishers are becoming your competitors and are becoming our client competitors. Like they are competing in all these verticals, these walled garden now. The funny thing is like, finally I'm starting, and now it's been 2 years to recommend MMM. I'm strongly for MMM now. And MMM is our only way to go across in a holistic way. We can agree and disagree on certain ways of doing MMM, but that's really the silver bullet now. I was with one of these walled garden yesterday, and they complained about one of the MMM results, saying that they should be involved more on the MMM result. I'm like, no, you don't have the right to be involved in MMM result. This is really the consequences of the strategy you have, which is not sharing data. So I'm becoming more and more this big supporter of MMM. Meanwhile, we are still testing some of these solutions provided by these publishers, but they are still very fragmented.
Completely.
And I'm not sure about how much we can rely on them without questioning them, especially that they are added value most of the time.
They change every day. The integration requirements change every week. It's like insane.
Well, I was going to say thank you for not lumping LinkedIn in with the other walled gardens that you guys are complaining about. So I appreciate that. From our perspective, and data obviously is a tricky subject for everyone. We start by understanding our members and their data and being very protective, and have always been, and it's actually served us well in the current environment. But thinking about how we use that data to help our advertisers and marketing partners be successful in what they are ultimately trying to drive. And this comes back to my comments earlier about understanding business objectives, understanding things beyond just media metrics. And there is third-party measurement. We've done some of that, and I think that's going to continue because there is a need to not just take our word for it, right, and have some validation of the value that we're providing. And what we've found is that our most sophisticated marketers, the folks who can really measure down to business outcomes and things beyond just the media metrics, those become our best long-term customers. And so we're increasingly figuring out ways that we can help them measure whether it's conversion, whether it's post-conversion activity, all of those things. I think if, as a publisher, and I'll say any publisher, if you're really creating that value and really creating that superior value, you want that to be measured. And we don't want people to just take our word for it. We want them to see it intrinsically and move more money away from a place where they're getting cheaper leads that actually don't turn into anything versus results that actually have more quality behind them.
I think that's the better kind of position, because it's a two-way risk. If you wall your garden, any savvy marketer, we said, look, just because it can be measured, people are measuring it. And that's the reality of where things are today. And that puts the walled gardens at a disadvantage for the advertisers that have multi-touch attribution models. And I think what you're left with at that point is, how do you look at the long-term metrics, right? Let's not look at the short-term ones. Let's look at the long-term ones that are influencing massive volumes of spend in brand, and they are adding value there. But it is something that is measurable now, and you could see it with media mix modeling too. And I've been on the advertiser side where we've been using that as a mechanism to pull back, because depending on the goals for the campaign, it's something that you have to be able to measure and place your money wisely.
Mm-hmm. Great. I want to open it up to questions for the last 10 minutes. We have a few that came in. So let's start. I think this speaks back to what you were saying, Mike, about the balance between art and science. It's not all technical. So how do you measure the ROI in content marketing, which is, it's up here?
So content marketing for LinkedIn, that's really the main thrust of our marketing solution. We have content marketing that brands can, in long form posts and lots of different ways, engage with the members who are on our platform. And content marketing has a lot of different aspects in that, it's graphical, but there's text, there's different ways you can approach it. My real learning and being involved with it over the last several years is content marketing is just marketing. And there's this sort of wish to think about it as something separate. Well, I've got my marketing and I've got my content marketing. The reality is we have marketers who are participating in all parts of the funnel with us in the same core ad formats with other things around and surrounding it. So for top of funnel and thinking about awareness and brand building, there are different messages, there's different infographics, things that have more of a feeling to help someone understand a brand better and have more understanding of what they do. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got very clear lead capture. We know a lot of information about our members. We ask them for consent. They can pass that directly into a marketer as a lead, get something in return in a frictionless step on a mobile device. It's sort of pretty awesome when you see it in practice. It's the same thing that people are trying to do in every other type of marketing. Content just affords you, I think, a lot of different options to have a much longer conversation than you can in a banner ad, even in a video, where attention spans may top out after a while. But I think the marketers who are doing it really well are viewing content marketing as part of marketing and not really thinking about it as a separate activity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, I think as you look at the identities and understanding the exposure, right, understanding who's exposed to that content marketing is going to help you with that longer tail attribution. So whether that's content marketing or videos or display advertising, really stitching all of that together to one individual consumer across their screens and across their devices allows you to measure the frequency and the lag for when they do start to go into organic site traffic or search terms or kind of reviews around a product, and it allows you to build those correlations much more tightly, which gets content marketing in that measurement mix.
I think just one other thing to add, and we've done studies, others have done studies around how much of the decision is actually made by a consumer before they even have a conversation with you, right? So in B2B or in other places where you're selling face-to-face, people have almost made up their mind completely. Maybe it's 50%. I mean, you see different numbers that are out there. Content marketing is a place where an interested prospect can be self-directed in learning as much as they need to know to feel confident to actually have that engagement with a person face-to-face. And I think that's something that wasn't done as much or to the same extent previously, and that's a big change.
Yeah. For us, I mean, we treat content marketing as a marketing campaign, and we're media agnostic. Our goal is really to identify points of exposure for the users, and then try to understand through our opted-in panel of users if there is a lift in visiting physical locations, so online to offline. So we develop tools basically to be able to understand the exposure to any kind of piece of content marketing delivered on the website, and then try to gap that or with stores visits, and we do the same. We apply the same methodology, regardless. It can be content marketing or an out-of-home campaign. So it's really just for us another way to expose users, and the goal for us is just to cover the exposed user set and then segment, by marketing exposure in order to understand what is performing best.
Right, and I think that that all kind of ties into the next question. Where does creative fit into this in terms of attribution? How do you pair those two together, or try to make sense of that?
Our best practices or how we proceed is always to isolate creative from the media impact. It's not always done. I don't see it always done that way. We try to deliver as much visibility into the performance of the creative versus the media, especially when you start with the segmentation. And the reason why you start with the segmentation and an audience is that everything you measure is actually becomes relative to that audience. What works for the mass doesn't work for a specific audience. The media channels that work for one specific audience and the creative version that you serve that audience might not be the one that you should be serving every other single audience. So we are starting to really be able to measure and associate our metric creative and media to a single audience, so we are optimizing within that context.
I think there's a couple ways you can look at it, and creative is a pretty broad concept. When you're looking to drive specific and measurable activities, and we were talking about this before, it's almost more about the process, testing and learning and iterating and having an algorithm process-wise to be able to arrive at what's really working, versus coming and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, where I've got 3 different types and we're just doing it. It's really an iterative and long-term process to arrive, and that may even change over time. But it's really thinking about the creative evolution more than a piece or two. But there's also, and I think there's less of it, although you see it and you recognize it, this concept of a heroic creative, where metrics kind of be damned, backlash be damned. We're going to take a stand and actually say something interesting, provocative, that's true to who we are. And those are brands that people appreciate.
Are you thinking of anything in particular?
No, you guys can fill in your own gaps about, if there are things that resonate, in recent memory. But in some cases, they're divisive, where you may lose a portion of the population, but the folks who it resonates with become even more deeply entrenched with your brand.
Right.
It's hard to attribute. I mean, those metrics go out the window a little bit, but it's
especially when you blend creative and segmentation with dynamic creative, the lines are completely blurred, and you got to be careful there. Was it the segment, or was it the pairing of that creative to that segment, or was it the creative? So that's where I think we rely on the advancements in ad tech to do that test and learn in real time, right, and optimize with very small samples. And I think that's really important to begin to figure out how we pair creative and with segments.
We are 100%. I mean, we're the very similar approach to what Karima said, which means in real time testing a combination of creative and segments, because literally the impact of a creative can be very different depending on the audience. So it's like you need A/B testing algorithm to try to have some real meaningful insights on what it can work best. So that's the way to go in our perspective.
Yeah, and I will add that it's all should be thought strategically. It's upfront, setting up your campaign and your measurement in a way you can, at the audience level, in a way you can measure it and optimize it that way. Yeah.
We are almost out of time, but if you guys can answer one more question and give a specific example of data that you're not getting from Facebook that you would like access to in as few words as possible.
Wait, you don't get
everything.
You don't get data from Facebook at all. You don't get anything from Facebook. So, for instance, even the basic, it's a pixelless environment, meaning that it's not possible to get any cookie of a user exposed to a campaign or any mobile device ID. So it's absolutely impossible to have the exposed user set, which is essential to run a brand lift, sales lift, or visit lift analysis. So it's really the most walled garden probably of the others, meaning that it's you don't get not even the basic information that you need.
But even within the walled garden now, we don't even have the luxury of choosing our data or the data we want to use within that walled garden. So, the recent evolution are limiting our capability of making choices, and we are left with one. which is use the data that Facebook built versus, for example, using other provider like Experian if I'm advertising for a financial service or using other types of data. So that's for me even worse than. And it's getting worse every day, so it's not getting better.
Grim. John and Mike, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly like the identity information and all of their likes, but I think just to put on par with what you're expecting from other media, a pixel, an IP address, a device ID.
Yeah.
It's critical.
All right. Great, we're out of time, but thank you so much. You made my job really easy. All right.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
You're great.
Please exit towards the stage to the left. Thank you.